In this video, we're talking about solid materials in plumbing. They can be broken down into three main groups: metals, plastics, and ceramics. So, metals, which of these is not a pure metal? A, copper, B, zinc, C, brass, or D, iron? The correct answer is brass. Okay, copper is a pure metal, zinc is also a pure metal, and iron is a pure metal. However, brass is not a pure metal. Brass is what we call an alloy. So the first distinction when it comes to metals is pure metals versus alloys. Pure metals, they come from single elements. If you did chemistry in school, you remember the periodic table of elements. So you'll find, if it's a pure metal, you'll find them on that periodic table. It's just one element. It's usually extracted from the ground in the form of an ore. So copper, zinc, and iron are all examples of pure metals, whereas brass is an alloy, and an alloy is a mixture of metals. So in this case, brass is a mixture of copper and zinc, right? So that's the first thing to know, pure versus alloy. Question: which statement about ferrous metals is true? A, they never corrode. B, they contain iron. C, they're always pure metals. Or D, they're plastics. The correct answer is B, they contain iron. Whenever you see this word ferrous, that's just the scientific word that indicates it contains iron. Okay? So, yeah, here we have it. Ferrous metals contain iron. Examples of these are steel and cast iron. So both of these contain iron and carbon mixed together to form ferrous alloy metals, right? Now, one distinguishing feature of ferrous metals is that they form ferrous oxide. Ferrous oxide is just the scientific name for rust. The rust that you've seen in your everyday life, that red stuff that forms on, red powdery stuff that forms on metal. So the scientific name for that is ferrous oxide. And when you see that, you know that the metal you're looking at, the rusty metal, contains iron. Non-ferrous metals, as the name suggests, means they have no iron in them. And because they've got no iron, they can't rust, okay? But that doesn't mean they don't corrode, because rust is just one form of corrosion. Okay, so a quick look at this table. So we've spoken about metals. We can break them down into four different groups. You've got pure, which is just one element, an alloy, which is a mixture of two or more metals. Then we've got ferrous metals, which is any metal that contains iron, and a non-ferrous metal is a metal that doesn't contain iron. However, you've got different combinations of these. So, for example, iron from the ground extracted as an ore is a pure metal because it's just one element, right? And because it's got iron in it, it's also ferrous, so it's a ferrous pure metal. However, copper, whilst it's also pure, because there's no iron in it, it's a non-ferrous pure metal, right? So you've got pure ferrous, pure non-ferrous. Then you've got ferrous alloys, which is any mixture of two metals. So for example, steel and cast iron, they both have iron in them, but because they've got carbon, that makes them an alloy. And because they've got iron, it makes them ferrous alloys, right? And then finally, you've got non-ferrous alloys, examples of which brass and bronze, right? They've both got copper and zinc or tin, so they're mixtures which makes them alloys, but because they've got no iron, they're non-ferrous. Okay, moving on, and plastics, which is a feature of thermoplastics. A, they can't be reshaped after setting. B, they're always brittle at any temperature. C, they're recyclable and remoldable. Or D, they're only used for tiles. The correct answer is C. Thermoplastics are plastics that you can recycle and reuse. So when it comes to plastics, there's two main groups: thermoplastics, which I just mentioned, and then you've got thermosetting. Right, the main difference between them is thermoplastics, you can melt them and remold them, whereas thermosetting, once they're set, you can't remold them, right? They'll burn, they'll melt, but you won't be able to reshape it. which means you can't reuse it. They're not recyclable, right? So that's an obvious disadvantage of thermosetting. Why use thermosetting then? Because thermosetting, they tend to be more heat resistant. So if you're dealing with hot liquids on pipes, for example, thermosetting will be a better choice than a thermoplastic because under heat, they become soft quicker. So thermoplastics, you can remold, you can use them again. Thermosetting, once they're set, you cannot remold and you can't recycle. Question. Which material is used for heavy-duty sinks and can handle high temperatures? So we've got A, vitreous china, B, ceramic tiles, C, fire clay, and D, polypropylene. Oh yeah, the correct answer is fire clay. So first of all, polypropylene is not a ceramic, it's a plastic. A, B, and C, however, they're all different types of ceramics. So you got vitreous china. Vitreous is just another word for saying glassy. It looks like glass, right? So if you think about toilet basins, toilet seats, bidets, those kind of things, they tend to be made from vitreous china. Ceramic tiles, floors and walls. And then you've got fire clay, right, which isn't used that often in domestic cases, but you've got these old school heavy, like square sinks. They call them Belfast sinks. Usually find them like in chemistry labs, that kind of thing. So they're very strong and they're very resistant to high temperature. Okay, whereas vitreous china, like I said, use it for toilet seats, bidets, toilet basins, that kind of thing. And tiles, bathroom tiles on the walls, on the floors. Okay, so to recap, in plumbing, solid materials that we use, they tend to either be metals, plastics, or ceramics. When it comes to metals, they can either be classified as pure or alloy. Ferrous, which means it's got iron in it, or non-ferrous, right? Remember, ferrous metals have iron, and anything with iron in it will lead to rust. Plastics can either be thermoplastics, which mean they're remoldable. You can use them again and again. Once you've melted them down, you can reshape them. Thermosetting means they cannot be reused after they've set into their shape. And with ceramics and fire clays, you've got three main types. Vitreous china, remember vitreous just means like shiny or glass looking. That's used for most of the stuff in regular domestic bathrooms. Fire clay is more for heavy duty stuff. So you'll find that in factories, labs, that kind of thing. And ceramic tiles, they're basically for walls and floors in the bathroom and kitchen.